They say small towns hold the biggest secrets. In Willow Creek, peace wasn't just expected. It was enforced, hidden beneath layers of smiling faces and manicured lawns. But sometimes, behind the whispers of good intentions, power festers. It wears the mask of righteousness cloaked in causes too noble to question. My name is Evan Barrett. I came here for quiet, for a simple life. For mornings filled with sunlight and evenings spent floating in the cool, clean water of my own backyard pool. I thought I had left the battles behind. I was wrong. One evening I came home and found my sanctuary destroyed by someone who believed their cause was greater than my rights. That night, something inside me changed. This is the story of how standing up to one's self-righteous neighbor became a fight for the soul of an entire community. Evan Barrett always believed moving to Willow Creek would be the fresh start he desperately needed. After 15 years battling corporate greed and high-stakes environmental lawsuits, he had finally walked away. He was tired. Tired of boardrooms full of excuses. Tired of fighting losing wars. Tired of noise. All he wanted now was peace, space to breathe, and a small, backyard paradise he could call his own. And for a while, it seemed like he'd found it. Nestled between tall, whispering pines and quiet cul-de-sacs, Willow Creek was marketed as a green sanctuary, a place where sustainable living wasn't just encouraged. It was celebrated. It was perfect, or so he thought. The centerpiece of Evan's new home wasn't the house itself. It was the pool, not a traditional wasteful one, but an eco-friendly marvel. Solar-heated, rainwater replenished, filtered with living plants around the edges. It was, in every sense, a symbol of responsible luxury. He spent his weekends tending to it, imagining the quiet afternoons he'd spend floating under the Colorado sun, a cold drink in hand, no emails, no deadlines, just the rhythmic splash of water and the occasional songbird. That fantasy ended abruptly one Wednesday evening. Evan pulled into his driveway, humming absently to the low murmur of the radio, tired, but looking forward to a quick swim before dinner. He rounded the side of the house, toweling the back of his neck when he froze mid-step. The pool was empty, not drained halfway, not leaking slowly, bone dry. He stood there for several moments, blinking at the vacant blue shell, gleaming mockingly under the sunset. For a brief second, he actually wondered if he was hallucinating, stress maybe, but the cracked earth at the bottom of the pool said otherwise. Then he saw it. A wooden sign hammered into the lawn beside the pool. Big, bold, uneven letters read, "Water belongs to everyone. Selfish luxuries aren't welcome here." Beneath it, a stamped insignia, Green Living Task Force, Willow Creek Chapter. And scribbled proudly beneath the stamp, Marilyn Drake. Evan felt his stomach turn into a knot. He knew Marilyn. Everyone did. She was the self-appointed guardian of the neighborhood's moral compass. Once, a respected councilwoman, now a self-righteous crusader who judged the color of your recycling bins and the length of your grass. And now, apparently, the existence of your pool. Before he could fully process the situation, he heard the unmistakable click of a gate swinging open. Turning sharply, Evan spotted Marilyn herself strolling into his yard as if she owned it. She wore a loose linen shirt, a wide-brimmed straw hat, and an expression of smug satisfaction. "I see you got my message," she said breezily, arms folded. Evan's voice, when it came, was hoarse with restrained anger. "You drained my pool. You trespassed onto my property and destroyed something I built responsibly and legally." Marilyn didn't flinch. If anything, her posture straightened, her chin lifting proudly. "This community has decided we will no longer tolerate wasteful individualism. Willow Creek is meant to be an example of sustainable living. Your pool sends the wrong message." Evan stared at her in disbelief. The arrogance radiating off her was almost surreal. "My pool recycles rainwater. It's fully off-grid," he said sharply. Marilyn waved a dismissive hand. "Symbolism matters more than technicalities. Children walk by here and see entitlement, not stewardship." For a long moment, Evan couldn't find words. His mind raced, trying to grasp the audacity of what she had done and what she believed she was entitled to do. He had spent years battling corporate polluters, but this was something far more insidious. Righteousness without accountability, moral outrage turned into personal tyranny, and deep in his chest, something old and sharp reawakened. Not rage, resolve. Evan took one slow breath and met Marilyn's icy gaze. "You think you're the law around here," he said quietly. "I am the voice of reason," she said, as if that settled it. Evan smiled coldly. "No, you're the voice of arrogance, and voices like yours, they don't get the last word." He turned sharply and walked back into his house, heart hammering, not with fear, but with fierce, calculating purpose. The battle Marilyn Drake had started would not end with a wooden sign in his backyard. No, Evan Barrett was about to remind Willow Creek exactly why he used to win in courtrooms filled with billion-dollar companies and why they had feared him. Only this time, it wasn't about contracts and regulations. It was about freedom, about community, about fighting the bullies who wore halos instead of horns, and Evan was ready for war. Evan spent the next few days not swimming, not relaxing, but planning. He knew anger alone wouldn't win this. Marilyn had clearly spent months, maybe years, crafting her persona as the savior of Willow Creek. She wasn't just an entitled neighbor. She was a symbol to some people here. A symbol he would have to dismantle carefully and completely. First, he needed proof. Late one evening, under the cover of twilight, Evan visited Harold Watkins, an old-school, no-nonsense former police officer who lived 3 houses down. If anyone had seen anything, it would be Harold. Sure enough, after one strong cup of black coffee and a brief exchange of grim nods, Harold handed Evan a flash drive. "Security footage," Harold muttered. "Caught her in your yard 2 nights ago. Flashlight tool belt looked like she was on a mission from God." Evan watched the footage later that night, jaw clenching as he saw Marilyn clear as day bypass his gate, crouch by his pool, and manually open the industrial-grade drainage valve. It wasn't a spontaneous act of protest. It was premeditated, deliberate, invasive. It was criminal. But the more Evan dug, the uglier the truth became. Through a connection at City Hall, a woman he'd once mentored on environmental law, he learned that Marilyn hadn't acted alone. For months, she had been quietly lobbying the local council to push forward community green certifications, offering tax breaks for areas deemed eco-pure. The catch: only neighborhoods meeting extreme water and energy restrictions would qualify, and the property values of those areas were expected to skyrocket once certified. And who was the primary silent investor buying up properties through shell companies in Willow Creek? Marilyn Drake. It wasn't about saving the environment. It was about flipping the neighborhood for massive profit. The realization hit Evan harder than he'd expected. Somewhere deep down, he had still wanted to believe Marilyn, however misguided, was doing what she thought was right. But now, looking at the paper trail of property deals and closed-door meetings, there was no room left for doubt. She had weaponized virtue for personal gain. That night, sitting by his empty pool, Evan felt a war brewing inside him. The lawyer in him, long dormant, sharpened like a blade. The citizen in him, the man who had moved here for peace, ached with betrayal. He could walk away, patch up his pool, forget about it, let it go. Or he could fight, not just for himself, but for every neighbor who had been manipulated, bullied, or forced into selling. For every person who thought they were powerless against self-righteous tyrants. Evan made his decision the next morning as the sun rose, blood orange, over Willow Creek. Evan wasn't pacing in frustration anymore. He was on the phone with an attorney. He was drafting subpoenas. He was organizing a neighborhood meeting under the radar. And most importantly, he was preparing to tear down the empire of lies that Marilyn Drake had built, brick by brick, fact by fact, in front of the entire community she claimed to save. This time, she wasn't dealing with scared homeowners or soft-spoken council members. She was dealing with a man who knew how to fight and how to win. And Evan Barrett wasn't leaving anything to chance. The community center was packed. Word had spread quickly, too quickly. Neighbors who once nodded politely and avoided conflict now leaned in, whispering faces tight with curiosity and tension. Marilyn Drake, standing near the front, with her signature smug composure, scanned the room with an expression halfway between triumph and irritation. She wasn't worried. She thought she had already won at exactly 7:00 p.m. Evan walked to the podium, a thin stack of papers in one hand, a quiet storm burning in his chest. He didn't start with anger. He started with a simple, steady voice. "I'm Evan Barrett. Some of you know me, most of you don't. I moved here to find peace, just like many of you." The room stilled. But peace doesn't mean silence. Peace doesn't mean surrender. He clicked a remote, and the first image flashed onto the projector screen, security footage of Marilyn trespassing into his yard, draining the pool with mechanical precision. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Another click. Emails between Marilyn and the council members revealing secret meetings, undisclosed financial arrangements, and promises of property flips. Once the eco-certifications were pushed through, another click. Shell company ownership records, property purchase plans, signatures tying everything back to Marilyn Drake. The final blow came when Harold Watkins, the retired police officer, stood up and publicly testified, not just about what he'd seen, but about the years of quiet intimidation, the subtle threats neighbors had endured if they dared oppose her. Marilyn's face, once so composed, turned the color of old paper. She tried to speak, tried to defend herself with the same tired lines about the greater good, but now the room didn't nod along. Now they glared. Now they saw. At the end of the meeting, Evan's lawyer served Marilyn official court documents, a civil lawsuit for trespassing, destruction of private property, harassment, and fraudulent practices involving real estate. But that wasn't the real victory. The real victory came when the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, in an emergency vote, unanimously removed Marilyn from any position of authority. She didn't just lose the lawsuit. She lost the very community she claimed to protect weeks later. As Evan sat by his newly restored pool, he watched a group of neighborhood kids splash and laugh under the warm sun. Their parents sat on lawn chairs nearby, chatting openly for the first time in months. Barriers of fear and resentment had cracked open, replaced by a strange but genuine sense of togetherness. Harold raised a beer in Evan's direction from across the yard. Evan smiled, lifting his own in return. He hadn't moved to Willow Creek to start a war. But he realized now, sometimes peace must be defended by those who refuse to stay silent. And sometimes the greatest victories aren't shouted. They're lived quietly in every safe, free, ordinary moment that bullies like Marilyn tried to steal. The sunset glinted off the rippling water, and for the first time in a long, long while, Evan Barrett truly felt at home.